sense. Anyway, listen, Henry Flagler built this hotel in 1888. Most of his guests came to town on the railroad, and the railroad back then only ran by daylight. They shut all their trains down when it got dark at night. Henry said to the railroad company, I want you to run a train after dark so my guests can approach my town and see my electric hotel and say, ooh and ah. The railroad refused to take Henry's money and run at night, and that made Henry Flagler mad. You know what mad rich guys do? They buy the railroad company. Henry bought out the railroad, started running it at night into Saint Augustine, and then extended the tracks all the way down Florida's east coast. So we got the Key West. That happened in 1912. The first train of Mr. Flagler's got to Key West in 1912. And he built a couple of hotels along the way, and that's why we credit Mr. Flagler with turning Florida's east coast into a tourist destination, because of his railroad and his hotels. Oh, by the way, if you're wondering where the train stopped in St. Augustine when Henry bought the railroad, I know. It stopped at the train station. Which is this brown roof building with the umbrellas open up top. Check that out. That was the depot back then. They moved the tracks a while back. That's now home to the San Sebastian winery. And just like the distillery, the winery makes wines from a grape that just does grow in Florida called the muscadine. And the winery offers a free tasting tour. That's right, free wine right there. Look across the street. There's kind of a vehicle blocking our view, but there are three identical buildings through the red light up there. Those three matching buildings were warehouses and railroad offices for Henry Flagler's Florida East Coast Railway Company. You know what's in those buildings of Mr. Flagler's today? College dorms. Those are college students. Wait. College students live on that corner? And on this corner is a winery that gives free samples. I'm thinking, yay, college. Look on this corner, by the way. That is the Saint Augustine City Police Department. We'll watch those college students closely for you, Mom and Dad. Step inside this yellow building on our right, because this is a chocolate factory. Yes, we got the Whetstones Chocolate Factory right here in St. Augustine. A local family opened that factory in the early 1970s. You know who they used to make fudge for? The Walt Disney Corporation. When Disney opened the Magic Kingdom in 1971, our little Whetstones Chocolate made all of the fudge that was sold on Main Street, USA the first few years. Folks, raise your hand if you're enjoying my tour today. You don't have to lie. Don't raise your hand if you don't like it. If you really like it, my boss Kim was thinking of firing me. I heard her talking in the back room. You know how you can help me keep my job? Write a review of my tour today. Go to TripAdvisor. It's a free app on your little smartphone. Write a TripAdvisor review. Like the feature of train tours in St. Augustine. Use my name in that review. You know what I get? A pat on the back and an ego boost. Kim's not really trying to fire me, but she does like to hear that her drivers are doing a good job. If you're going to write a review of me, remember, my name is Alex. Now, if you want to help me embarrass my 3 teenage sons, could you add the word handsome to the front of the name Alex? Could you call me Handsome Alex when you write your review? It's a joke I started about 2.5 years ago. People actually do it. They write Handsome Alex reviews, and I promise every time I get one, I use it to embarrass my 3 sons. You know what I do? I read the Handsome Alex reviews out loud at the dinner table when they have friends eating over. They're like, Dad, knock it off. Nobody thinks you're that good looking. And then I remind them that they're probably going to look a lot like me someday when they grow up. Those poor kids. Handsome Alex, if you want to write me a 5-star review. Handsome Alex, if you don't know the guy about the way I look. And if you hate my tour, I still want to read your review on TripAdvisor. If you hated my tour, you tell me what I did wrong. And remember that my name was Cynthia. Or Felicia, I don't care, anything other than Alex. All right, we're going to go back to Lincolnville. Don't really back. Anyway, we're going to go back to Lincolnville. I got to talk about a rough time in Lincolnville's history, but an important time in the civil rights history of the United States. In the early 60s, Lincolnville was still mostly an African-American community, and because of that, there were things in town the kids in Lincolnville wanted to do they were told they weren't allowed to simply because of the color of their skin. Well, listen. There was a group of young men who lived here in Lincolnville, high school and college young men, African-American kids, who went to a dentist in town named Dr. Haling and said, we think this is a load of garbage that we can't sit down in a restaurant and order a meal if we want to. He said, I can help you organize a sit-in. We'll use the Woolworths department store. They have a lunch counter. Those young men said, good, we want to do it. He said, understand two things. You're going to get arrested, and you're probably going to get hurt. They said, we need to do this. So in 1963, with Dr. Haling's help, they organized a sit-in at the Woolworths lunch counter and did get arrested. And that led Dr. Haling to call a friend of his you might have heard of, Dr. Martin Luther King Jr. He invited Dr. King to Saint Augustine to fight for civil rights in 1963, and in 1964, Dr. King showed up. One of his trips, he spent about 2 weeks here. He led 2 marches and rallies on this street we're crossing right here. That's why we renamed it Dr. Martin Luther King Jr. Avenue. For Dr. King's own safety, on his 2-week stay here, they had him sleep in a different house every night that he was here. People were always threatening to firebomb the places he slept, so you had to be pretty brave to offer your house to Dr. King. Enough people did. And after he left, some of them admitted, yes, Dr. King spent the night here. Well, one of the houses he stayed in, right here on your right, this white 2-story house with the maroon trim. On the front yard, you're going to see a plaque with a picture of Dr. King signing their family Bible the night he stayed there. You know where that Bible's on display today? Probably somewhere inside that house, because the woman he signed it for still owns that house today. She's in her mid-90s, and I met her one day, and she said she still reads from that Bible today. Very rarely she tries to take very good care of it because of how old it is. All right, folks, I got 2 things to combine. Our French history and more proof that we're good at naming things in Saint Augustine. You ready for a French history? We don't have any. You ever hear of Napoleon Bonaparte from France? Napoleon never came to Saint Augustine. But his nephew, Prince Murat, did. In 1821, at 21 years old, Prince Murat moved to St. Augustine, and for 1 year, Prince Murat lived in a boarding house about 2 houses back off of this corner. That house is still there today, and this is where it becomes a story of how good we are at naming things. You know what we call the house Prince Murat lived in? The Prince Murat house. Yeah, there you go. You're catching on. You could move to St. Augustine, ma'am. I saw you mouth it. All right. You know, Henry Flagler wasn't the only hotel builder in this town. His friend Franklin Smith built one, too. And then went bankrupt before he even opened his hotel, and Henry Flagler bought the hotel from him. So at one point, Henry Flagler owned 3 hotels here in St. Augustine. On your left, the Hotel Alcazar. Coming up on your right, that 3-story white building, the Casa Monica Hotel. That was the one Henry bought from Franklin Smith. And then straight out, or slightly to the left, his first hotel, the Palm. So the Casa Monica is the only one of Henry's 3 hotels that's still in operation today here in St. Augustine. It's got a haunted room. I don't know what room number, but good luck if you stay there. His first hotel has a haunted room too, haunted by the ghost of his second wife who went crazy and tried to kill Henry Flagler twice. He stopped her both times, had her put away somewhere, not at a jail, where she could be taught to be less kill people all the time. All right, where's Florida's capital? Tallahassee, Florida. You know where it used to be? That's right, St. Augustine, Florida. Capital of Florida used to be right here in St. Augustine, which means Florida's governor had to live and work here, and they lived and worked right here on this corner on your left. That is the most recent version of the governor's house. Governor's house sits right across the street from this beautiful little plaza in the middle of town. So let me tell you how St. Augustine was built. First, they had a royal decree that said they had to start the town with a central plaza. It had to be rectangular in shape, just like we have here. And the central plaza could only have Catholic churches and government buildings around it. Everything else had to be on the streets that went off of the plaza, like Avila Street right there on the right. That was the first street they built off the plaza. That makes Avila right there the oldest street in St. Augustine. And after we go once around the plaza, we're going to get to ride down that oldest street in St. Augustine. Over here on your right is a statue. That is the guy who named this place Florida. That's Ponce de Leon. Now, Ponce, he was only 4 feet 11 inches tall. Sounds short, right? But he was actually average height for a male in Western Europe around 500 years ago. But they say he still was concerned he wasn't tall enough, So he had a rule: when he was captain of a ship, you didn't get to work on that ship if you were more than his height. Had to be shorter than the captain to work on his ship. This is Cathedral Place, named for the Cathedral Basilica of Saint Augustine. This is home to the oldest Catholic parish in the United States. There has been some kind of Catholic church in this town ever since the first one was built in the first Saint Augustine 456 years ago. This version of the church wasn't built until the late 1700s, added on to a couple of times after that. So 6 years ago, we turned 450 years old. You know who came to celebrate that birthday with us? During our party on the plaza, the King and Queen of Spain stepped out on that brown balcony of the governor's house, and the King of Spain made a speech to the people of Saint Augustine. Excuse me, ma'am. You just took a picture. I wasn't smiling. Can you take it over again? Couldn't get her to take my picture. All right, let's go back around this side of the plaza down King Street. This pretty old church on the right, the first non-Catholic church built here in the middle of town. This is Trinity Episcopal Parish. And this yellow Wells Fargo building, this was the Woolworths department store in 1963. Look in the front windows there. You can see the Woolworths name engraved on the door handles. And if you look between those posters, you'll see the old lunch counter where those young men sat down in protest back in 1963. So Avenue Street is the oldest street in St. Augustine, so I guess it's the oldest operating street in the continental United States. Want to hear another story of how good we are at naming things? The Spanish had a royal hospital in this town, and in Spanish, instead of calling this Avenue Street, they called it Hospital Street. We don't have that hospital, but we do have Nick over here, who runs the Spanish Military Hospital Museum, a great little place where you can learn all about colonial medical history, like amputations, but only after they couldn't stop an infection from spreading. Nick, what are you doing? What time does the Crackery tour start tonight? So 7 o'clock, he does a tour where they don't teach you the polite history of medical history here. They teach you the dark side of St. Augustine's medical history. It's a really cool place. Lots of great little restaurants and gift shops in this part of town. The most amazing ice cream sandwich ever in the history of the world, right there at Peach Pie Ice Cream. They do some really good flavors. Art galleries. Don't buy yourself a snow globe that says St. Augustine or a keychain. Buy some locally painted artwork to display on your wall when you get back home as your souvenir of St. Augustine. You want some artwork to display on your body? We're going to go into Joe Bagnell's shop right here. This guy makes handcrafted gold and silver jewelry. He's got some beautiful stuff on display in his window right there. Come by and check him out. And his store, too. Not just him. He's a good-looking guy, but check out the stores along here, too. Hello, folks. On my right is a wall. A wall. Listen, this wall is made out of coquina, the same material they used to build our fort. I want you to look for the round indentations about this deep in the wall that don't go all the way through and did not make cracks. You know what those are made by? Cannonballs. By the way, where are my people on the train from Georgia? Who was from Georgia? Yeah, we don't like you, because those cannonball holes were made in 1740 when your Georgia governor, General James Oglethorpe, led a raid on St. Augustine. He had us under siege for 30-something days, but he wasn't able to take us, because all his measly little cannonballs did was make dents in the coquina walls of our fort. 30-some days, he finally got fed up, he left. At first, he sneaked into this town with his foot soldiers, and they burned every wooden building in town to the ground in 1740. There was another burning of St. Augustine in 1702, also done by the British, that destroyed the entire town. By the way, if you're enjoying these bumpy brick roads, on the count of 3, join me in thanking Henry Flagler.